After a brief detour with 18 mechs, Track Talk is back with 1830. We will jump into the auction with Trancis Fresham, which is possibly my favorite name on the website, by the way, and he will start us off on the Mohawk and Hudson. Martin will take the D&H, and we now have the three major privates bid on. Physics Squirrel will be joining Trancis Fresham on the Mohawk and Hudson, and into the next round, we have now the Delaware and Hudson starting to fill up. And Martin will be taking the Camden and Amboy. So there are two bidders on the three main privates. Squiddy now has the option of being a third or opening the Champlain and St. Lawrence, which is what he decides to do. So he will be on the CNA and the Champlain and St. Lawrence, probably not actually hoping to win the Champlain and St. Lawrence, knowing that Martin may be forced to buy the D&H, and then he will have trouble price enforcing the CNA, but we will see. Physics Squirrel joins him on the Champlain. Now there's two players on each private. Transit Fresham may be willing to pull here, and does. Champlain and St. Lawrence, if I was Squiddy, I would be tempted to just pass here. But he gives it a bid, and I think we'll probably see Physics Squirrel pass then, and he does. Going to the D&H, so Martin is on two privates to go, and Trancis is on just one. This is his final private. Oh, no, he's also on the Mohawk and Hudson. So he has the option to play it a little loose here. He doesn't have to push too hard for the D&H because he does have an option in the Mohawk and Hudson. Probably doesn't want to let it go for too cheap to Martin, though. So we'll see how aggressive he decides to be. He is staying with Martin for now, and he passes there. So Martin gets it for 105, pretty reasonable price. Will make it hard for him to really go very high on the CNA, as Squiddy is going to be willing to go higher than him most likely, but would be happy to drop it as he does have $10 of revenue, I think. That would leave him with the B&O though. So moving on to the M&H, Physics Squirrel and Trancis Fresham, and we will see if they are willing to bid this very high. Physics Squirrel, if he loses this, will be sitting on the B&O, so pretty motivated. And Trancis is making him work for it. 170, getting pretty high, and Trancis actually wins that. So Physics Squirrel will be leaving with a B&O almost certainly. That does mean that Martin and Squiddy are off the hook, so to speak, so they just want to make sure that one of them is not getting this for too cheap. But they will be going later than Trancis in priority no matter who wins, so not necessarily too worried about a quick flow to the PRR. Martin lets it go for just 205. So Squiddy, in theory, has enough money to float the PRR, but based on priority, probably will not be given that chance. And we will see, I assume, Physics Squirrel getting the B&O here. He does, and he will par it at 100. Into the first stock round, Trancis Fresham will be taking his choice of companies, can par, or can float without assistance, and he will take the C&O. Martin 2D is taking the PRR to prevent Squiddy from floating, and Squiddy will pass. Physics Squirrel doesn't have enough money to float on his own, may just sit on cash and wait for the B&O to tick over. Alternatively, can spread it around and just get some paying shares and force other people to float the B&O for him. So electing to pass for now, and we will see the C&O and PRR continue to work their way towards floating. As a result of this, it looks like Martin will have priority in the next stock round if the other players continue to pass. Physics Squirrel decides to buy into the C&O and gives Trancis priority as a result. And we do see the C&O now floating up. It is already operating before the PRR, so will not have an opportunity to buy its privates without withholding or selling down. C&O running to the west, buys a single 2 train. PRR running towards Lancaster, and also buys 1 2 train. So not much, pretty standard openings. And Martin will pass to try and maintain priority. Squiddy just sitting on a single share here. can sell out of the PRR and float, which it looks like he is maybe going to start doing. So he's going to try and force this presidency, and we'll see if Physics Squirrel wants to defend. Looks like he's willing to. So I may just see Squiddy force him to invest some shares and then sell out. Well, instead, he's able to call Physics Squirrel's bluff and take the company. So Physics Squirrel instead may sell out here and then be free to float something else. I didn't see, so the NYNH is available, so we may see Physics Squirrel just sell out and do that. He prevents the B&O from being dumped back on him, but we'll just be buying paying shares for now. So B&O will be operating first. He is a track lay behind the PRR as a result of floating late, so we'll be going south. And he buys just a single 2 trains. So there are only 3 trains bought. Nobody can buy into the 3s just yet, which works just fine for Francis Fresham and Physics Squirrel, as they are sitting on the most income from the C&O. And he does pay that out. PRR will get to the Lancaster and does not drop a token. So a little bit of a slow start, but pretty standard so far. Everybody has money for shares if they want them, and Francis will buy a B&O. Martin also buying B&O. Squiddy stuck with this PRR because he doesn't have as much cash. Physics Squirrel has a ton of cash and 3 paying shares. So maybe looking for a float here. And is just continuing to buy shares. He's happy to slow play it. Says he has the most shares in the game, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Although that's not true. He's actually a share behind Martin. And he also has no private income, so. Physics Squirrel does take the presidency of the NYNH, but it seems like he may be reluctant to sell down to actually float it. Yeah, so just reserving it for now. That does mean that he will not have priority going into the next stock round, may suffer some loss of net worth from other players selling shares before he's able to get to them. I'm going to start heading east and still just staying on the 1 train. So there will force the new company to buy the 2 train before they get into the 3s. Baltimore now heading north, realizing that the green trains are not in effect yet and may have a chance to sneak into Lancaster just depending on operating order. He does buy a second 2 train. This opens up the 3s to Martin if he wants them. And he will be just laying some standard track, probably running for 40 instead of 30. And he pays that out. Will he buy the remaining 2s into the 3s? He decides not to. So we will see these players passing and seeing what Physics Squirrel wants to do. He does start selling out, so now the rest of the players can buy those shares for cheap, and I assume he will be floating the NYNH here. So he's actually taking a second presidency, parred them both very low. So if he actually gets both the NYNH and the NYC, he's going to have to do quite a bit of withholding at some point in this game in order to get a permanent train in them. But he may be hoping that the other players try and steal one of these companies from him and dump it down, so they will be stuck with a second company which was also parked low. A little bit of a standoff there. He should not be able to defend both of these companies with some good play from the other players. There are a lot of market shares which are going to prevent the other players from selling out of their companies and getting liquidity to contest this. So we'll see if this works out. Looks like the other players are content to just pass. So he's floating the NYC, probably just holding the NYNH kind of hostage to ensure that he doesn't get track blocked from the New York City tile. I don't believe he has enough money to float both of these companies, does he? Looks like he's getting pretty darn close. So he's going to buy 1 share and then sell it and then buy the other share. So he's able to float 2 companies in 1 stock round. That's pretty good for him. He will be going last, but he's got two brand spanking new companies, and they are very synergistic. So that is quite nice to see for Physical Squirrel. B&O now, we are, I believe, still not in the threes. Yep. So cannot break into Lancaster, but assuming the NYNH and NYC buy into the threes, we should see B&O still be able to do that. He is 4 stock bumps ahead of the PRR, and unless he gets sold all the way down, will be operating before the PRR. He runs, does he just run? I thought he had 2 trains. He does. So he's just running 1 because he doesn't have the route and doesn't want to spend the token. CNO will link up with the PRR track, and he's just going to hold on to his token. PRR now has basically no track to lay and will just be running for 40. NY and H, so he buys into the threes, which is painful for him to have to do because there are 2 new companies floating behind him, and neither one of them has to buy a single 2. That makes the 670 par for both of those companies a little more palatable. It also should be noted that Physics Squirrel doesn't actually have a private to buy in, so he can buy a 3, maybe 2 threes in one of the companies and still have a reasonable amount of cash when the permanent trains come around. So Martin 2D kind of feeling under the gun here, needing to buy 3 2 trains to buy in his private. Not ideal. He is able to buy in the private though, and leaving it with just $82. He will be going second in priority. Will have enough cash if he wants to try and float something else. But in terms of remaining companies, options are limited. B&M and Erie, you got to assume that the B&M is a non-starter because the NYH and the NYC are working together, so might be left with the Erie here, which is a company that is slow to get started sometimes. So we'll see. NYNH lays track towards Albany. You got to assume that they're going to be working together. Does buy 2 3 trains, buys 3 3 trains, so really going to be pushing to rust these 2s. There are 2 players with only 2 trains, and the PRR has a single 3, so he is willing to spend the cash. He might push right into the 4s. Oops, sorry, back the wrong way. Very aggressive play from Physics Squirrel. This is the kind of play that you either win or go bankrupt with, which makes the game a lot of fun to comment on. And I see. So he just bought 3 trains to keep money consolidated in one company. I would have loved to have seen him buy the 4 here. I think that would have been maybe too aggressive, but would have been cool to see. Francis Fresham doesn't have a whole lot of cash, can sell out of the B&O to raise some more capital, but it's going to be hard to float this stock round. So he will just buy into the NYC, as it has the 2 3 trains will be running pretty well very shortly. Martin selling down and looking to float, I would assume. Doesn't have a whole lot of cash even with all those sales, so won't be able to par for 100, and he will take the Erie as we suspected. Squiddy, probably buying cheap shares, just waiting for now. Might be hoping to trash the Erie position on the market. The Erie is going to be operating first unless it gets sold down 3 times, which seems unlikely. So there, I suppose, is a chance that the CNO will be able to run its 2s, but it seems unlikely. He's going to sell down the NYNH into the orange, leaving it just a 3 train and a few bucks. He has done what he wanted with the NYNH to lay this cooperative track, and now he will invest in paying shares with hold on the NYNH to get the capital back in the company. The other players may want to buy at least one of these shares, if not take the company. It is a little risky as the trains seem to be flying pretty fast. But you definitely don't want him to have all those brown shares when the next stock round comes around. Francis, happy to take a NYNH out of the market. Martin is going to continue to float, hoping not to lose priority, just to get his cash invested. Squiddy also leaping on one of those NYNH shares, and Physics will presumably be buying maybe the PRR as it has a 3 trains guaranteed to run. Yeah. Francis sells out of the NYC, putting that into the yellow. I don't love that. Physics would be happy to run two companies in the yellow and just buy all these paying shares, I'm sure. What is he going to buy instead? He also sell. Ooh, so what is he hoping to accomplish here? Is he going to sell down one share of the CNO? That won't get him enough money to float anything. He's putting some shares in the brown. That's always dangerous. Um, so he's just hoping to get enough money to par the B&M for Max, and he's just reserving the presidency. That seems low yield. Martin, will he let those brown shares just go? I guess he has limited options here. He needs to have enough money to float the the Erie. Squiddy, on the other hand, may be very tempted to snap those up. Lets them go. So physics is unable to buy them. The players need to make sure that Physics Squirrel is not operating early in priority in the next stock round, or else he is going to have a field day with these brown shares. He is buying a B&O now that the players have sold out of it. And Francis sitting on his money, Martin continuing to float, Squiddy just passing. And we are just waiting on the Erie to float now. Will he sell down a share and go after some of those NYNH shares? He does, and he will buy an NYNH. But it looks like, oh, he will buy 2, 3. So he now has 3 companies, and doesn't have a whole lot of capital, but as we've seen in the past, running 3 companies does give you a lot of control of the map, and it also allows you to control the rate that the trains come out to some extent. So he is going to be looking to withhold for sure on that NYNH and just accumulate cash that way, and then that gives him the freedom to run the PRR and take 80% of that company either into the company or into his private stash. Squiddy will have priority in the next OR, and Erie is floating first. He will be racing the NYNH in some sense to get into Rochester, it looks like, and buys the 3 and does not buy the 4. I guess, now that he has, well, he has a ton of 2s in the PRR, so maybe hoping that he'll force someone else to buy the 4 and be able to save some of the money in the Erie. He does have quite a bit of train liability right now. The CNO will be happy to buy that 4, though, I'm sure. He is in the green now. I expect we'll see a token on Lancaster. So unfortunate for the B&O player that the operating order worked out the way it did, unable to get into Lancaster. And will he take that 4? He does. So B&O will be falling back. Just more bad news for the B&O player, having a rough time. B&O now upgrades Baltimore, hoping to get into the Pittsburgh track perhaps, and will be buying a 4. This player is not the original B&O player, if we recall, so he does have privates. He's actually the CNA player. It's going to be rough buying in those privates. He has very little cash left and has limited track potential as a result of the Lancaster play. PRR now. Happy to lay those dits, I think. Oh, well, just optimize his run into Baltimore. Someone's got to lay those double dit tile. And he's happy to pay out. NYNH, will he race down to Reading and Allentown? Instead, upgrading Albany. And as a result, is only running 1 train. NYNH probably playing to, well, he's certainly not cooperating with the NYC. He wants to keep the Reading and Allentown tile out of the NYC's hands, probably. That is an interesting track, though. I assume he has plans in the future to leave the NYNH a way of getting out of New York, so maybe setting himself up with that track. It also prevents the B&M from ever really getting down into Reading and Allentown, because there's no upgrade that will go southwest with that track, at least from the New Haven lead-in. So he has a 3, and will he withhold here? He does. No reason not to. You only own 30% and want to stay brown for as long as possible. C&O now, will he be laying this double dit? Yes. He actually does not lay it in a way that will get him into New York, though. We'll be running up to Albany and potentially tokening Albany. PRR will operate before that and does have access to a token. So this is bad news for the NYNH. However, it's the same president on the two companies, so it's going to pain him to token that and potentially put the NYNH in a really miserable position. But he's got to have to do it because C&O otherwise will. And he's buying in his privates, so he will be flush with cash going into the next stock round. Yes. Unfortunately, only the CPR is left, so he will just be completing his float on the B&M. Erie now. He is running to Rochester and does not token it, and will maybe be heading to the west to that second 00 through Rochester. PRR, upgrading Pittsburgh, and he is also withholding. May see some train shuffling at the end of this operating round with the NYNH buying some trains out of the PRR just to combine with the cash of the two companies. So he elects to buy the train out of the NYNH so it doesn't have a run. He could have done this differently and still had a run in the NYNH, but then he would have left the PRR train list, which I guess he was trying to avoid. B&O just taking the easy money, upgrading Washington. And he buys the CNA, which opens up the Philadelphia tile to basically no one, actually, until the next operating round. Neither the NYC nor the NYNH are going to be able to do anything with that until the next operating round happens. This leaves him with basically no cash in the company, and we will see how he tries to recover from that. NYC here does do the upgrade into Reading and Allentown, and we will see if the NYNH is going to let the C&O get that token. I can't imagine he does. NYNH running 2 trains and happy to pay it out. NYNH now heading towards Rochester to cooperate with the Erie. Does need to be a little bit careful by laying that track. The NYC can get there with one lay and token Rochester, which would be quite painful for the Erie. Erie will be operating before NYC, and it wouldn't take too many sales to get the Erie behind the NYC, which would be pretty much impossible to fix. So a little bit risky in my perspective. NYC does have the money for a token. NYNH now probably buying a train with all of its money from the PRR, which is exactly what happens. So the PRR now has basically permanent train money, and the NYNH is very unattractive for other players to buy into. One thing that scares me a little bit is that he left literally $0 in the NYNH, so he cannot shuffle trains without buying that 3 out. If for some reason the 3 were to rust, he would be out of pocket for whatever train was available. Seems very unlikely that the 3 will rust before the PRR is able to operate and buy a train out of it, or even the Erie. But it is, a potential risk. Definitely new players should be leaving at least $1 into their companies. Martin, of course, is not a new player, so we trust that he knows how to handle this. Squiddy, parring the last company, CPR. CPR did not have tragic track laid for it, but there is still an opportunity with the Champlain and St. Lawrence in the B&O. Physics Squirrel is selling an NYNH. Doesn't get a whole lot of money for it, obviously, but does prevent a dump, and is going to be giving that share to Martin, basically. Physics Squirrel looking to get into the Erie, probably going to be tanking this a couple of times to guarantee that the NYC gets the Rochester token. Transis is buying into the NYC. That company is going to be running well for at least another OR or 2. And Martin will be taking his brown shares, because why not? Not like he has much money for anything else. but he is the share leader as a result of the brown shares in the NYNH. Squiddy continuing to float the CPR, I presume. Yep. And Physics Squirrel is passing. He does have cash, so maybe looking to wait a little bit and manipulate turn order. He may just be waiting to see what other players do. Martin now buying an NYC, and the CPR and the BNM. So he buys a CNO. CNO is ledged, so he's not going to be trashing this stock. I sometimes debate with myself whether or not I buy shares that I don't really care about, just to make it less obvious that I'm just killing time in a stock round to manipulate turn order or trash stock value. So I imagine other players have had this same thought. I'm not saying that's what Physics World is doing here, but not unreasonable. You know, if you just start passing with a bunch of cash, the other players are going to be a little suspicious. Whereas if you invest and then sell out once they've already invested all their money in their companies, they have a little bit less time to react to what you're doing. So these two companies are floating. Physics Squirrel is passing, although I am a little bit surprised. I would like to see him knock down the Erie another time. He needs to get the Erie down to 67 that the NYC can get that token in Rochester. Maybe he just doesn't value that token as much as I do. I mean, it's not a great token, but it would be pretty devastating for the Erie's track development and make it much easier for New York, the NYC, to secure a run west later in the game. So I don't think it's something that's trivial. I think it would be important for him to try and do. Squiddy floats. Physics Squirrel still passing. Transis is already floated, which means that Physics Squirrel will have priority. Martin will have priority, and unless Physics Squirrel decides to make a change, which he doesn't. So he's happy to give up that Rochester token potentially. More importantly, he's giving a Erie the opportunity to token an Albany if he wants. Now, the Erie, as we mentioned, may be hesitant to do so. And will be operating after the CNO, so maybe not getting that opportunity actually. BNM will be upgrading Boston, has pretty limited track options, so taking a safe move and just upgrading its route for now, and probably just buying 1-4 here. CPR doesn't have a route, may not want a route, may just buy the 4 and the 5. Is looking to run this company, it looks like, and buys into the 5s. CNO does not have the money for a token and gives itself access into New York even without the Albany tile with that lay. That also kills the Boston, the B&M's potential to use that DIT track to run anywhere it wants. Erie does take the Albany token. So the NYNH has a exit through that brown tile that was just laid, but it pains him a little bit, I'm sure, to not be able to token Albany and leave it open. He will be getting a 5 train here, and there should be just one 5 train left. Yep. So what will we see in the 6s? 6s next OR for sure with the B&M. Unless Martin sits on the 5 in the PRR, which I don't know if he'll do. I mean, I imagine he wants that 6. What I'll say is that if he doesn't buy the 5, the B&M will buy the 5, and then everybody with money, namely Physics Squirrel, will be train locked. So he may buy himself some time, but he is passing up some cheap privates to do it. He may be able to withhold and then get both 6s, but he will have to be very careful if that's what he wants to do and slow play it. B&O just running, paying out. B&O was able to buy a 5. I think I maybe missed that. So the PRR should definitely be buying a 6 here then. Because the B&M certainly will if he doesn't. Upgrading Albany, running his 2 trains, and he only has one company. He has nearly permanent train money even if he has to buy a D, so probably we'll just pay this out. PRR taking that Philadelphia token. It's unusual for the Philadelphia to be laid so late. We're in stock round 6, operating round 6. He is withholding, and I must have misread the game state when I was speaking earlier. So the only 5 that has been bought is in the Erie and the B&O. So if the PRR does not buy a 5 here, the B&M will, and then they may stall at the 6s, which may be what he's going for with this withhold. Instead, he does buy the 5. That does mean that the 6s will be coming out next operating round, and the NYNH will certainly be withholding then. And does he shuffle any trains? No. But he does have cash in the NYNH again, so it won't be caught with a forced purchase as he has $0 in the company. It was kind of close, though. I mean, the 6 train is going to be coming out literally second operating company in the second OR, so he took it down to the final wire there, basically. But this is a game of inches, so playing it tight like that is sometimes what you need to do to beat good players. CNO, let's upgrade the Philadelphia. Tokening in Philadelphia here, you never like to do it, but there's not going to be an easy run through Reading and Allentown, so you will be potentially cutting out the PRR there. Alternatively, could token Pittsburgh and cut out the PRR from running west. And he does token Philadelphia. Late game with many withholds, we may see the $120 track laid, in which case that Philadelphia token becomes much less attractive, but that is many withholds in the future, so for now, I guess he thinks it's worth it. This does run him the risk of being tokened out in Pittsburgh, but you can only defend yourself in so many locations. Eventually, you gotta, miss out somewhere. And he's happy to pay out. B&M, I imagine, will be seeing that 6 now. So he passes his upgrade, or track lay. To me, sure, you don't want to pay the 120, sure, you don't want to pay the 80, but why would you not at least upgrade Boston? Am I crazy here? We're in brown, and the Boston, yeah, I mean, no reason not to do that, in my opinion. It does buy the 6. CPR does not actually have a valid route yet, is not on the hook for a D train if one comes out. So may want to defer laying that Ottawa track, and does. So that's kind of a nice juke or pump fake. You give the other companies the impression that maybe you're going to run, and then don't actually do it. So still technically a suitcase. May want to look at getting that money out of the CPR and into the B&O, as the B&O is going to be happy to use that for his last token. Erie is upgrading Lancaster. And actually the NYC, after all of my hemming and hawing about the Rochester token, does in fact get that Rochester token. So he has cut the Erie run in half. Not insurmountable, of course. The Erie can eventually link up these 2 tiles, potentially. But funny that after all that talk, he does eventually get it. B&O running 2 trains should be running pretty hot here, and upgrades Baltimore just to get a couple extra bucks. And he will pay that out. NYC doesn't have a train, but does have money for a train, and will be getting that last 6. PRR with a permanent train, maybe looking to head up to those 00 tiles, just upgrading Pittsburgh for now, and does not token it, but may look to token it in the future. Of course, who are you tokening it against in reality? The Erie you own, and the B&O can't token Pittsburgh again, so really it would just be the NYC, and he's not getting down there anytime soon. NYNH on the hook for a train. May see him shuffle here. Otherwise, he will probably shuffle and try and get all of his money into one company. And he will go into the next stock round with enough cash for a couple of shares. We'll eventually have to buy a D, but happy to just wait it out. So the PRR now has 400 bucks, and we'll be able to also buy that Erie train over if it wants to get 500 bucks. He will probably be buying other people's shares and hoping that they start paying for his D train. He sells a PRR, and we'll be buying a B&O. So yeah, just looking for paying shares. You know, a company with 400 bucks in it, if you're in a different position than he is, may not be a total barrier for the other players. So does someone try and take this over? Looking at Physics Squirrel, he has got a share in there already. He's got a permanent train in his other company, so just on the hook for one permanent train wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world for him. PRR has pretty good track. Not going to be getting into New York, but, well, actually that's not true. Can get into north of New York, and then not going to be worried about getting token out of Pittsburgh and can run up into these double O tiles. So would potentially have a D run, but it might be a little scary getting there. Squiddy selling on a CPR, so we will see just a full-on suitcase, and he is buying a B&O. Everybody's looking at the B&O with two trains, seeing that there may be a little lag on the D train coming out, and hoping to get in on that good revenue. Physics Squirrel buying the Erie, getting a little money from the IPO as a result. And Transit Fresham happy to join him. Martin buying the NYC. And that will be floating up now. One thing I'll point out is that selling out of the PRR does hurt Martin in terms of his share lead. He was quite far ahead there, but having to sell down does lose him some potential there. So Physics Squirrel, Squiddy, and Transit Fresham will be quickly catching up to him. Physics Squirrel continuing to go for the B&O, taking the $25 hit, but with a revenue of 34, you're going to get your money back. And looks like the players are just going to be content to buy out the B&O. It is a pretty safe investment. I mean, Squiddy is not going to be eager to dump the B&O and be stuck running just the CPR with no track. Martin's passing. Squiddy has a ton of cash, which means that probably Physics Squirrel will be gone first in the next stock round, and he floats up the B&O. Physics Squirrel investing further in the Erie, and everybody is passing, so actually Transit Fresham will have priority. Well, Physics Squirrel has something to say about that. He sells out of the C&O, presumably because he sees that D train come in and doesn't want to have any part of that, even though he was safe from a dump with the current share distribution. And will he be taking the PRR here? He's taking another Erie. Not a safe investment. He's going to be going last in priority, and Martin would be probably more than happy to dump a company on him, would be my guess. So he is just taking shares. That will make the Erie operating a little bit later. It also hurts Martin's liquidity and his net worth. And does he take the PRR now? Investing in the B&M. So he may just be going around trashing everybody's shares. He may be worried that we're on the brink of a bankruptcy and hoping to just get a big enough lead that when someone bankrupts, he will come out on top. So he's investing 3 shares in the B&M. B&M is a, I guess, reasonably safe. It's operating far enough behind the C&O that it would take a little bit of withholding to get it in the right operating order to dump it, but definitely still doable, so not an entirely safe investment there. But he is starting to go for that PRR, which is what I was kind of suggesting he might try and do. So he looks to just be buying everything he can get his hands on. Surely he doesn't want the CPR. He sells the B&M down, trashes that value, and funny. So he's just going about things in a strange order, but he's eventually going to be taking one of these companies. Probably not both. Now the president of the PRR, Martin's going to be a little bit reluctant to sell out because it will put him in the brown and give Physics Squirrel a bunch of shares that he otherwise wouldn't have. But it's also really not safe for Martin to stay in this company above 1 share either, or else he may find this dumped back on him. Martin is passing. Physics Squirrel going to continue buying shares here. Okay. And Martin says, well, as long as I operate before him in the next stock round, I have nothing to worry about. So he's going to hold on to those shares. Physics Squirrel does take the CPR, so he's now running 3 companies, went from 1 to 3. Doesn't have a whole lot of cash in either of these companies, but CPR is still a suitcase, so it's basically a free $171 in CPR for right now. He has the NYNH, which is operating on the north, so going to make it very hard for someone to break that suitcase as well. So just happy to take the cash from the companies, I guess. And he is now 3 shares ahead of his closest competitors. And he sells down, gets that into the yellow, and maintains the presidency. Does he have another share that he wants to buy with this liquidity? So Squiddy sells out. Could have done that before. Instead, just ate a little dip in its net worth as a result of holding onto it for that extra turn. And Squiddy, as a result, is potentially giving away priority back to Physics Squirrel. He will start buying the brown shares of the NYNH. And Squiddy, is he just going to sit on $400? He will buy an Erie. Physics Squirrel is probably loving this, though. I mean, he's got 2 new companies, not new, but I'll say gently used companies, and maybe we'll be able to even hold on to priority, which would be incredible. So he's maxed out now in terms of investment, and Squiddy is going to give him priority. So Physics Squirrel got away with murder there. Squiddy is just continuing to invest, and as we mentioned, Physics Squirrel is going first. So PRR is very dumpable. So is the NYC. He can dictate the rest of the course of this game at this point. He's got almost $600 towards his D train, only needs 1 of them, has good track for it, and can dump on Martin at any point. So we probably have a winner here. He's got a big stock lead. He is only slightly behind net worth in Transis Fresham, but Transis also is on the hook for a D train down the road. And he's got 2 yellow companies. He's got a heavy investment in the NYNH, which is brown. I think that Physics Squirrel is probably going to take this game now. CNO withholds, seeing that a D train is on the way. And he actually shuffles to get all of his cash in the B&M. Of course, the B&M is definitely not a company that you want the D train in, given that it's running a total of 2 stops and will have a hard time getting beyond 3. Well, that's not true. Technically, it will run 5 if it lays both of these tracks, but that is $200 worth of track for basically a $50 of revenue, which doesn't seem worth it. Squiddy now still running 2 trains and starting to head up to that 00. Does have a token, so if it's able to get to Dunkirk, it will almost certainly token there and prevent any future D trains from running through there. B&M will start laying to the north. The maritime provinces are always an underwhelming offboard in withholding. Erie upgrades New York. Now he's ditched his train liability. He's happy to spend the cash, and he will withhold as well. Not entirely sure why we're seeing him withhold there. He maybe wants to use his token or upgrade one of these 00 cities. little bit unclear to me. He has no train liability. 6 with the NYC, and he gets the second upgrade on New York and will be running for 210 as a result. He is also withholding. He does have a train that he needs to buy. Would probably be happy to run a D in the New York or New York Central. So may see him shuffle with the PRR here. And so he does buy the train, but he leaves his cash split. The So I see the New York must have shuffled the money into the CPR, and then he's going to buy cash that way. So CPR next turn will probably be buying the 4 out of the PRR. CPR does buy the train from the PRR, so he has enough money now in the PRR for the upgrade. And he is laying track to get the NYC down into the south in the PRR, potentially up into the double O's for its D runs. Martin, pretty limited track opportunities here, very little cash, but does have a permanent train, and just withholds that. So Martin is doing some withholding here on both of his companies, has 2 permanent trains. Not entirely sure what he's hoping to accomplish here. Maybe trying to shuffle trains and force his own bankruptcy or something like that. Unclear to me what his strategy is here. He does like to call games, when he thinks they're over, so maybe that's what he's doing here. C&O has 2 trains running for a lot and withholds in order to get the train in for the B&M eventually. So probably we'll see the B&M buy the 6 over and then have the C&O run the D. B&O, this may very well be the last time it runs these 2 trains, but it has no other liability for the presidency, so we'll just probably pay this out. And does get into the double O, does not token. B&M heading up towards maritime provinces, or maybe hoping to get into Montreal. It's a little bit more expensive or more revenue for it to do that. And also withholding, probably will be buying that train out of the C&O, as we said, and does buy the 6. So the C&O now is very close to permanent train money. We'll technically still have to pay as it stands as it right now. Erie running to the other double O, and still withholding. So if he's not looking for a bankruptcy, he is looking to take this game to late. NYC, happy to just pay out. Now we will see the upgrade for the D. And now all the companies will be buying their final trains. Martin, as a result of these withholds, is getting close to a D train of his own. Unfortunately, doesn't really have the track to make it worth it. Neither the NYNH nor the Erie have a great D run or a great double 5 run. I suppose the Erie could run a 5 train through New York using this token and then look for action in this double O with a second 5 train, but the odds of it going uncontested for those double O cities seems unlikely with tokens left in both the NYC and the B&O. CPR probably remaining a suitcase. Oh, so I missed what was going on here. Boston is running to break the suitcase. So he is fallen on the grenade to do that. He's not running to the maritime provinces. Sorry, I missed that. I should have picked that up earlier. CPR laying track to allow other companies potentially to run into Ottawa and into the northwest of the map. NYNH, will we see more withholding from Martin? He does. Is he going to shuffle trains now to buy a D into the Erie? Not yet, but we may be seeing that in the near future. B&O running into Chicago. Unfortunately, only running 1 train and likely only to be running 1 train for the rest of the game. and happy to pay it out. CNO on the hook for a D, and we'll just be forced to buy that out of pocket. Sells an NYC, an Erie, and gets away with just 2 sales. That means he will be going into this stock round with very little cash. So Transis, see you later. Unfortunately, I think you're out of this game. NYC, laying some track. What is the significance of this track? It allows the NYC to run into Dunkirk from the north. Doesn't seem super useful there. So I'm missing what he's going for with this track. NYC running 6 and paying out. Erie now has $400 and enough money to lay and then token Hamilton and Toronto, but does not do it. And he withholds again, so now he has 2 yellow companies, or a yellow and a brown company. Unfortunately, doesn't have much cash to be able to take advantage of that. So he's been withholding so much that he's not going to be able to buy up a lot of his shares. And I'm sure that his opponents, Squiddy and Physics Squirrel, will be happy to take those shares from him. B&M 1 track lay away from breaking the suitcase. In the PRR first run of the D train, will be laying into Chicago and running for 300. If he pays this out, he will still remain in the yellow, so he will not really have a great reason not to do it other than that he needs a CPR train in the very near future. CPR, probably going to be looking to buy the 6 out of the NYC, and then the NYC will have the D train. The bad news for all the rest of the players is that the CPR is solidly in the brown, and Physics Squirrel has priority. So even if they force it to buy a train, he will have a bunch of cheap shares, and he has the cash in order to buy that train when it comes. NYNH running, and also withholding. Will he shuffle trains now? He does not. So Martin is just withholding ad nauseum here. I'm not sure if this is him with a next level strategy or just being petulant. Physics Squirrel buying the CPR, expect him to buy all of these. Francis Trestram has no money and will be passing, frankly eliminated. Martin may be buying his own yellow shares, but if he's going to continue to withhold, may as well buy other people's shares. He does buy CNO. And Squiddy buying the last NYC. Physics Squirrel, not at risk of buying into his cert limit, probably looking at the CNO with the Erie and NYNH holding as much as they are, be a little leery of buying into those. He will look to the CNO. Martin, limited on cash, will buy a share, but not going to be getting too many more of those. So we expect to see Physics Squirrel's stock advantage continue to expand. Squiddy buying an NYNH. Physics Squirrel buying the Erie. And Martin buying his last share of the stock round. Squiddy also taking the NYNH. So the NYNH is now a community company with a 4-3-3 split. Nobody is going to be pulling ahead based on that company's runs. And Physics Squirrel continuing to invest in the yellow shares. Squiddy is passing, maybe kind of adverse to running the risk of a dump here, which would be feasible from Martin, but he's got so much cash in these companies, at this point he probably just wants to buy a train if he's still playing the game. Physics Squirrel can buy some B&O shares here, or I keep saying B&O, B&M shares, and looks like he will probably buy one more and then be passing. So he will be going last in the next stock round after being given the gift of priority in this stock round. Hopefully the players won't make that mistake again. So Francis Fresham is given priority. Physical Squirrel has a whopping 29 shares and is 11 shares ahead of Martin and much further ahead of the remaining players. So as we thought an OR or two ago, he is in a very dominant position. Does have the need for a D train coming up, but is $300 already to it and will be making a ton of money in this stock round from all of his shares anyways. B&O laying towards Columbus, maybe hoping to just optimize his run a little bit. And looks like he's content to run for 240 for the rest of the game. C&O running his D train first time. Fortunately, his track is okay, but not phenomenal, so probably not going to be enough to bring him back into this game. NYC, happy to take advantage of these track lays to get into Chicago and running for 260, paying that out. So he's not fearing this impending D train at all. It looks like not withholding. B&M will link up with the CPR. So finally the B&M will be breaking into triple digits on its revenue. Erie does lay the 00, and will he token it? He certainly has the cash to do it, but elects not to. PRR, this company will maybe withhold to maintain his orange or brown status, and also to get funds for the CPR to buy its next D. It has the cash, will it lay the token? So none of these players are interested in tokening these 00 cities, but he, with a win or hold, is 2/3 of the way to that D train. So we'll probably see the CPR shuffle trains, and the PRR may well be buying the next D, unless he buys the NYC's train into the PRR and then buys the 6 from the PRR with the CPR. Looks like he is not going to do that just yet. So NYNH will now be buying the D train, it looks like. I missed the fact that he had bought the train out of the NYNH with the Erie. Did leave himself $100, so will be looking for a token at some point, but apparently content to hold on to it for now. NYNH buying the D. NYNH's D train run is underwhelming, so I guess you got to run it with one of your companies, but not really going to be breaking the bank with just the NYNH. CPR now on the hook for a train. Will he lay Ottawa? He does. If you're in a bad situation, may as well make the best of it and start making money with that company. Expect he will be buying a train from the PRR most likely. So Physical Squirrel is going to be running the D train in the PRR and the CPR. He doesn't feel confident that he will be able to have a good D run with the NYC. Did have the option to arrange things so the NYC would have that train if he'd wanted. B&O, working on looping around into these double cities. The Erie will be able to complete that track if he elects to, and still no tokens. I don't follow this logic. The B&O doesn't have a D train and should just be looking to mess up these other players' D train runs, in my opinion. A token on any one of those 00 cities would be inconvenient, to say the least, for the D trains. C&O, he is running into Chicago still and has no money for track. B&M has also done his due diligence to link in the CPR, and as a result has no money for track. Still not upgrading Boston, which is strange to me. NYC, hoping to prevent the union of the two 00 cities. The track that would be required to link them up now is laid just south of Cleveland, so safe until that track gets upgraded. There are valid upgrades for it, so not a forever solution, but kicking the can down the road at least a little while. Erie running 2 5s, and we'll be paying this out. Now the PRR is on the hook for the D train. We'll have to be paying out 400 and some dollars, and does complete the loop now. In tokens. So finally we see someone drop a token on these 00 cities. The B&O and the Erie still have tokens, so this token does not secure the PRR, its D run, but it does prevent the other trains from running through there. Erie, so some of the shenanigans with the track up here may have been an effort by the NYC player to prevent the Erie from running west through these cities and then down into Pittsburgh. It actually can't run south into Pittsburgh directly, and as a result can't token in Pittsburgh, so maybe that was some of what we saw going on there. NYNH just running for 180. Very disappointing D run, but what are you going to do? The Montreal or CPR will be heading west, maybe hoping to link up into these 00 cities down the road. B&O still has $100 for a token. Will he drop it in one of these 00 cities? He does. So players were just playing a game of chicken to see where these tokens would come out, and now they are both down, which is going to be quite painful for some of these D trains. But the B&O doesn't care. He's got a secure 5 run. B&M finally upgrading Boston. NYC may be hoping to bypass the Albany for either the PRR or the NYNH. PRR actually doesn't get much benefit from that, so maybe just throwing that track away so nobody else can use it. Not entirely sure there. Some of these late game track lays are hard to analyze in real time. Erie running 2 trains, but as a result of these tokens has a much worse run than it did in the past. Actually, it doesn't change at all. It's because he wasn't able to fully run the 1D train as a result of incomplete track. So still running for 300, which is good, but not going to be enough. NYNH running for 180 still. And he's withholding. Does give him the opportunity to lay that 120 cost hex, which is the only place he can go with the NYNH. CPR, hoping to link up with this 00. And withholding to stay brown, or for a cash for a token. Not entirely clear. PRR will now be running its D train for the first time, and does allow the CPR to link up with one of these 00s. PRR also withholding. So just a quick look at the game state. Physics Squirrel is technically behind Squiddy, but has almost double his shares and has no train liability. There is $7,000 in the bank, so we're probably looking at another 2 operating rounds, would be my guess. None of these runs are phenomenally high, and some of them are quite low. So probably not going to be able to bank the bank in the next 3. And there are no shares other than one in the B&M to... Oh, sorry, there are paying shares in the CPR, and Physics Squirrel has made them brown, so he's eligible to buy those. So everybody will be getting at least 1 share. It looks like Francis Fresham will be getting 2, and then the next ORs will run. So just confirming that all the shares have sold out. And they have, and Squiddy has priority. He has no ability to dump on anyone. Physics Squirrel is going second in priority, does have the ability to dump on other players, at least with the NYC. And Francis could also potentially dump on Martin, but if you dump, you have no other shares to replace your dumped shares with, so probably everybody's feeling pretty safe. So the rest of this game will just be laying track and incrementally increasing your runs, but with such a share lead, he is 16 shares ahead of his next closest player. it's hard to imagine that Physics Squirrel is going to lose. He has money for tokens in 2 of his companies, so can defend his runs and screw with other people's runs if needed. Going to be very hard for the other players to overtake him. Why don't we just skip through this OR and just ensure that Physics Squirrel is running for more than the other players, and then we can probably call the game. So Physics Squirrel is running for quite a bit more, and the market, we started with 7,000-ish, so we're only down to 6,000. Did someone else buy a train? No. So the bank will not break. Let's skip to the end of this set, and Physics Squirrel may be in the lead now. He's running for substantially more than everyone else, and he is in the lead, so I see no reason for the game state to change. We will skip to the end of the game. And Physics Squirrel takes it by $2,300 approximately. The second place and third place were quite close, and Francis Fresham in a distant last place. So very interesting play from Physics Squirrel, pretty aggressive, was able to survive the train rush and run 3 companies successfully. Well played. Thank you for listening.